Welcome to the second marketing lecture video. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the marketing process. What do we mean by the marketing process? Well, you have it here on this slide. It's all the steps that any business needs to go through in order to successfully market its products or its services to its customers, whether they be consumers or businesses. So the first step in that process is to determine the needs and wants of those customers. Let's just take a minute to think back to our last video where we learned a definition of marketing. Do you remember we said that marketing is really all about finding out what our customers want and providing them with the product or service they want at the right price, in the right place, and promoting it in the way that works for our customers. But how do we know all those things? How do we know what the right product is? How do we know what the right price is? Well, we need to come to the first step in this process and we need to answer those questions. We need to determine what it is that our customer needs and what it is that our customer wants. So that's going to be the focus for this video. But before we have a real focus on that, I just want to say something about the remaining steps in the process. And we will come back to these in subsequent videos. So we start by finding out what our customers want. And once we know what they want, only then can we design a marketing strategy that will work with those customers. And once we've designed that marketing strategy, then we can put it into action. We can construct our marketing program. We can start to create those products. We can set our prices. We can decide on our promotion techniques, and we can make sure that we get our products to our customers in the way that works for them. So now we've constructed our program, we've got our products, we've set our prices. Now we need to be in touch with our customers. We need to build relationships with those customers. And if we can make those customers happy with our products, then and only then can we begin to capture value from them. What do we mean by capturing value? Well, really, we're talking about selling. So we've been through all of those steps in the process. We've found out what our customers want. We've designed a marketing strategy that works for those customers. We've put it into action by constructing our program. We've built those relationships. And the last step in the process is that we are selling our product to the customers. So when we talk about capturing value, really what we mean is we're taking the customer's money in exchange for our products and services, because that's where we begin to achieve our profits. But let's start now by going back to the first step in this process, which is to determine the needs and wants of our customers. Because it's those needs and wants when we put together that equal the demand for our product. So how do we know what that is? How do we know what customers need? How do we know what customers want? Well, even for the simplest of products like a pizza, if they're going to be successful, that usually happens as a result of really solid market research. So even for a pizza, how do we know what kind of flavor, what toppings people will want to buy on their pizzas? How do we know what size pizzas people will want to buy? How do we know what price they're willing to pay? How do we know what kind of promotions are going to encourage those people to buy from us? How do we know what our competitors are doing? How do we know the best way to get our product to those customers? Should we go through supermarkets or sell them direct? What should we do? Well, all of these questions can be answered by market research, can't they? And some of that market research will be looking around at information that's already there, like what are our competitors doing? But some of that market research we might actually have to speak to customers for. But however we collect that market research, it's vital. There are very few, if any, businesses that can succeed without doing some research. It's absolutely essential. So when we think about market research, we tend to think about the product that we're selling now. Let's go think back to our pizza. But actually, one of the things that marketers have to remember is that it's really important to focus not just on the product you're selling now. It's also important to think about what our customers might need and want in the future. So I want to show you a little video that explains this idea that we call marketing myopia. So we learned in the video that satisfying customer needs isn't just about focusing what customers are buying now. It's about thinking about why they're buying those things and what their needs actually are, and what is the best way now and tomorrow of meeting those needs. So before we leave this topic, I just want to talk about another example of marketing myopia. You may have heard of the company Kodak, or you may not. It's a name that's really familiar to me because before the year 2000, Kodak was the biggest seller of cameras in the whole world. And at that time, there was no such thing as a digital camera. All cameras took photographs based on rolls of film, and Kodak was the market leader selling rolls of film. So if we look at these little graphs at the bottom here, the first graph on the left looks at the number of rolls of film that are sold over time, and we can see a peak in this graph. And at this point in the peak, nearly 1,000 million rolls of film were sold every year, and that peak hit about the year 2000. But see what happens after the year 2000? Those sales fall to almost nothing. If we look at the second graph here, this explains the reason why, because the red line here shows the sales of analog cameras, which peaked in the year 2000 and then fell again to pretty much nothing. Whereas the blue line shows the sales of digital cameras, which rose at the same time. And by 2006, they had reached a peak. So what has happened here was that digital cameras became the new way that people wanted to take photographs. People never had a need to buy an analog camera. They had a need and a desire to take a photograph. And digital cameras came along and provided a better way of taking a photograph. And of course, with a digital camera, you don't need to buy a roll of film. So how did that impact on Kodak? Because Kodak never really thought that digital cameras would take off. So this is what happened to Kodak. This blue line is the share price of Kodak. And we can see that Kodak's share price reaches a peak again around the year 2000, at the same time when analog camera sales peaked and when film rolls peaked in their sales. But after that, just as the sales of film fell and the sales of analog cameras fell, so did the share price of Kodak. So Kodak's share price went from almost $100 right down to nothing. And that was pretty much the end of Kodak. They suffered from marketing myopia because they just weren't looking at what the real customer needs were. They were too focused on their product. And so the first step in the marketing process is perhaps the most important one, and it's really focusing on what the needs and wants of your customers are. Not what they like about your product, but what their needs and wants are. Okay, so that was the first step in the marketing process. In our next video, we're going to focus on the next step, and in particular, we're going to start looking at the marketing system. But that's all for now. There are a few questions now for you to answer.